The menacing mountain trail loomed before us, a deadly uphill combination of relentless switchbacks and steep cliff faces. Our small platoon of weathered warriors had been trekking up an ancient Incan route in Peru for nearly 4 hours. The constant exposure to the blazing sun and the uneven dirt surfaces meant rest stops every few hundred yards for my weary younger brother and nauseated 53-year-old father. I began to seriously doubt whether they would be able to hike for the remaining 2 hours necessary to reach our final destination, Machu Picchu. A wondrous Incan sacred site carved entirely from stone and wedged neatly into a mountainside 8,000 feet above sea level. As I summited a treacherous flight of centuries-old steps, I glanced back down at my brother and father, laboring on all fours to make progress up the miserably steep risers. Seeing my sibling struggle to keep up was no surprise. Nearly 3 years younger, he often felt the need to prove his physical equivalence against his older brother, and thus never backed down from any challenge. But my dad had always been the strong one, the steady shoulder against which I could lean to catch my breath. However, it dawned on me now that my father would not be there on this occasion to hoist my brother onto his back in his usual heroic style. With the apprehension of a new commander leading his troops into combat for the first time, I descended back down the incline and wordlessly lifted my brother's exhausted frame onto my back. The added weight dragged me down, and I wondered in earnest if we could make it up the grueling remainder of the trail. As our ascent continued, and the mental monotony that accompanies most grueling endeavors set in, I reflected back on the various events that had transpired since our adventure had begun. We had done our fair share of sightseeing, but the antiquated buildings and cobblestone streets quickly faded from memory. Instead, I recalled an experience at the Maria Salome Casa de Huerfanos 48 hours before. After being hissed at by the elderly white-haired woman hiding behind the enormous brass door of the facility, asking about the deflated soccer balls I was carrying with me, I found myself surrounded by the clamor of 50 energetic young boys repeatedly asking, "¿Qué hay en las bolsas?" What's in the bags? As calmly as I could, I shouted, "Tengo regalos para ustedes, nuevas pelotas." I have presents for you guys, new soccer balls to play with. And despite my exhaustion from pumping up 200 second-hand orbs, I had the time of my life playing soccer with those boys, determined to prove myself against my formidable preteen opponents. While everyone found a place to rest as the golden sun dipped behind the craggy mountain, in the distance, I caught the eye of a scruffy-haired boy about the age of my brother, scooting next to me. Luis rambled on in Spanish about everything he thought might interest me, desperate to keep the notice of someone who paid attention to him. It was only toward the end of our conversation that he revealed the startling truth as to why he lived in the orphanage. His father had been murdered just 8 months prior, in their home, and his mother, previously kept checked by the compassionate protection of Luis's father, had become physically abusive. Well, I choked on, lost for words and unable to comprehend this incredible tragedy that had befallen my new friend. All this, and he was only 13 years old. Weeks after I returned from that unforgettable trip, immortalized in my mind by the unparalleled view from the top of Machu Picchu, I popped open my laptop to find a message from Luis on my screen. I stared intently at it, reading and rereading. Gracias por las pelotas. Cada vez que jugamos con las nos recordamos en nosotros. It took me a moment to figure out that he had said, "Thank you for the soccer balls," and that every day they reminded him of the fun we had. But it was the soccer ball icon and smiley face that needed no translating whatsoever.
That's great.